Hey, what's going on, everybody? BDL 44 coming at you with another video. Um, I don't know what exactly is right in this situation. So, I'm just going to pose the question and kind of leave it at that. Is Judaism a race or is it a religion? Because I ask because I understand that The View has suspended Whoopi Goldberg for her statements, basically claiming that the Holocaust was not about race, but more so about the mistreatment of human beings, and being that the human beings who were mistreating one another were Caucasian, she figured it more or less canceled out the notion that it's a race being involved. Now, I'm not up for saying anything that's going to hurt people's feelings, regardless of what accuracies or inaccuracies are out there. If someone's offended by the sky is blue, then it's just that. They don't owe me an explanation. They're offended. I need to be confident in what my intentions are when I say that around them, and the consequences of it. So it's not about whether or not people should feel offended by her statement. It's more so about the inaccuracy of it and whether or not she should be suspended based on it being inaccurate. I need to understand this because I'm a black person who can convert to Judaism if I were so to choose to and follow the practices and be honest about it. That would be something I could do. But race is not something you can convert to. I cannot convert to being an Asian man, or convert to being a Caucasian man, or convert to being anything other than black, right? It don't rub off. So that is what I'm here to ask. I'm listening to a lot of people in the black community, and they're essentially saying what I'm saying here is like, if I can convert to Judaism, then chances are calling it a race, it's obsolete. And what she essentially said is that the situation was not about race because of the fact that the people were, what she said, were Caucasian. For which I don't know who all was there. It could have been a bunch of different types of people there. I don't know. I'm ignorant. So I'm not here to cast aspersions, but I am here to try to make sure that I'm looking at this correctly, and to make sure that I'm understanding what it is that she's being suspended for. And most importantly, I want to make sure that I'm viewing this properly, because as an African American man, I speak of myself and not for our race. I tend to look at how we're treated when we say certain things about certain people, and see how that falls out, and it just sometimes doesn't seem as fair, I guess is the best way for me to put this, as it should. And maybe, dare I say, some racism might have something to do with why she would be suspended. Not necessarily about what she said, but about who she was when she said it, and about whom she said what about. Now, if we're going to suspend people for saying certain things, I would like clarity for as a consumer, as someone who would either choose to or not watch The View, as to know what it is that I have a right to do in the presence of people, especially individuals who would be offended. Do I have a right to even ask this question, or is this considered offensive? And most importantly, is Whoopi Goldberg being mistreated because she's black, saying these things? That's a legitimate question I have to ask, because I understand that we're coming off of an era where a lot of people are offended by the notion that black people have pointed out the fact that they don't feel like they've mattered very much in certain cases. Regardless of what your opinion is, this is just the facts. People have pointed out they don't feel like they've mattered, and it's been a much to do over the last 2 years about Black Lives Mattering, and the various slogans that have come with it. And so I think it's a good possibility that we're seeing a bit of a backlash as it pertains to the resentment of such. But I think the root problem was the fact that we didn't feel like we were getting the type of respect that we deserved prior to. And we were seeing situations such as these where other groups would be given this type of respect as to which we didn't feel we were getting it. I know for a fact that Jewish people have a great deal of power in our country, or that there is a stereotype of such that is understood and would need to be, clarified for me to not be ignorant in that regard. And I understand it, as the stereotype would have it, that if you say certain things about these people, that there are harsh consequences. And we are seeing that here with Whoopi Goldberg. Should I resent that as a black man who doesn't seem to feel like that's always the case across the board as it pertains to other groups? Maybe not as it pertains to my group in this era, but I'm not just speaking for myself. Would Whoopi get the same treatment if she said something about a different group, not black or not Jewish? Would she have been suspended for 2 weeks for saying that about another group, or saying something that may or may not be accurate? I do not know this to be the case, and I can't say that I'm going to be able to come to that conclusion as I sit here in this phone. But what I can say is this just further reinforces some of these notions, further reinforces the divide, further reinforces that stereotype about Jewish people having a certain level of power that you should not ever try to cross in any way, shape, or form. If you were to dare question them, regardless if it's accuracies or not, there will be backlash, there will be consequences, and you will be challenged to never do it again. As to where maybe that's not the case for other groups. As I grow, I understand that there's a lot for me to learn. And as I've looked back on my life, I've known people of all different types of races and creeds that have treated me very kindly, including Jewish people who I've known and loved in my life. Teachers, students that I've known, that I've gone to school with, people that I've gotten along with very well, that I would not look to offend with my statements, nor would I be happy to hear that they were offended by something Whoopi said. But at the same time, in order to come to some conclusion, we must have some difficult conversations. And I'm not afraid to have those on this camera. The only reason, and I mean the only reason why I have the notion that the idea that Jewish people having power is a stereotype is because I was called out on it when I mentioned it once myself. That is a stereotype that they resent because not all of them have a lot of power. That just like anyone else, they fall in all different types of spectrums of power and in classes, etc. Not all of them are rich, not all of them are poor, etc. Just like many of us. But it stands to reason that stereotype stands because there are a lot of Jewish people who have a lot of power. And I think with that power comes a great deal of respect, whether earned or given. Not for me to make the determination, but I know for a fact in my lifetime, black people who've said things that have offended them have gotten consequences that are very harsh, harsher than some of the consequences I've seen from other situations. I know The View has been on for many years, and I wouldn't doubt they've said accurate statements about different groups, and it has not turned into no 2 week or 2 week or what have you suspension. Especially if there's a question about whether or not what was said was accurate. And there are questions. So as a black person who feels that my race and your race should be considered in all things in regards to being offended, if you are Jewish and you're watching me, I believe that Whoopi Goldberg accepting her suspension was the right call because someone was offended by her words. And I think that's reason enough to want to just humble oneself. But I think the conversation for people on the sideline like myself is responsible as well on her behalf as a black person who stands with her, right or wrong, based on the notion that I can convert into Judaism and still will be a black person. So if the Holocaust, in her words, was not about race, but in the treatment of how people treat people, should we not treat that with some sort of credence as it pertains to whether or not she should be allowed to say it without suspension? Should she not be able to say something that is accurate? The Holocaust was a horrible event that I will condemn for the rest of my life. I would not compare it to any other event. It's not my place. I do understand that a lot of people compare it to different events, and that can cause a great deal of conflict, even war in some cases. So I don't take this conversation lightly in any way, shape, or form, and will admit my ignorance more than once so you guys understand that I am aware of it. But I'm telling you, I would like to understand this clearly, because as of right now, I do not understand it. I don't understand where she actually was inaccurate, more so than that she offended others, because I do understand that. I think the most responsible way to handle these situations is to have conversations. I think the most we can do for ourselves is to learn what hurts one another's feelings and what is inappropriate to say and what is accurate and what isn't accurate. And if we don't have these conversations, then we will run across notions that will be inaccurate, that will be offensive, and we won't know any better. Which is why I bring this to my channel, and I hope that this is conveyed in a space of love and peace. Because even if I don't pray like you, I can still stand and believe that you have the right to pray and that you should not be killed or put in positions or concentration camps or have anything happen to you in any way that is inhumane, regardless of your race, creed, color, religion, sex, orientation, or otherwise. I think that most of us agree, regardless of our race and creed. I think there are a lot of people out there who may not agree with that, but I think the majority of human beings want to see good for human beings and animals alike. I really believe that. And I think the best way to learn how to love one another and to break down those barriers of stereotypes and things of that nature is to not only have these type of conversations, but to treat one another fairly as we make mistakes in this fashion. But to also be honest about certain things. Are we treating certain people with certain types of respect that maybe we wouldn't give others? And is that based on color? Is it based on class? Is it based on religion? Is it just based on who owns what at this time? I don't know. All I know is that the running notion, and it's most plainly put, is if you cross Jewish people, there will be harsher consequences than if you maybe do so to others. And maybe that's changed since the advent of Black Lives Matter. Maybe you view that as it pertains to black people. And I hear that conversation clearly, and I understand it because I can see it myself. A white man can't say certain things about a black person without getting canceled. That is not lost upon me, nor do I think it's fair. But I've been watching situations such as these from afar as it pertains to people of the Jewish faith for much longer than I've seen this Black Lives Matter thing running. I can tell you that. And I've always understood that stereotype to be a very consistent one. That you don't cross them. And if you do, you're going to have harsh consequences. And as far as I can tell, that's not fair. So we need to be honest about that, all of us. And those who are afraid to have that conversation, it's not going to help the situation. It's not going to help. As we go into a new world with new things and new ideas, new generations going to be running the country, it's going to be conversations such as these coming about more and more. Because people don't want to go with the way of the old world because we have new ways of wanting to live. We're all online communicating with one another. It shouldn't be like it was back in the 90s and beforehand. Now we can break down these barriers of communication. Now we can knock down these walls of stereotypes to have real life conversations. Am I going to get in more trouble for talking about you? Or are you going to get in more trouble for talking about me as a black man than maybe say my Spanish brothers are going to get? Say my Indian brothers are going to get? And if so, how can we find a solution for that while still maintaining who we believe ourselves to be as human beings? I'm a Christian man, non-denominational to be exact. And I share love and faith with people who don't share faith with me. Because I was raised to love folks for their differences and for their similarities. That's what my mother was. That's what she was about. And she would never want me to get up here and say anything that isn't mindful of love first. So that's what I try to do, man. I want to live in a world that's fair. If you said something terrible about my Hindu brother, I want to know you're going to get the same suspension as if you said something negative about my Asian brother. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't want to live in a world where some people matter more than others, even in the presence of long-standing imbalance in that regard. If we're going to find that balance, we need to all be in agreement. And if we're going to all be in agreement, then we have got to come to some understanding. So was Whoopi inaccurate? Regardless of whether or not she was hurtful, was she inaccurate? And if so, can we start having that conversation? My name is BDF44. Thank you all for watching.